All right. Good afternoon. This is my wife, Rosalie Olguin, and I'm Lefty Olguin. Of course, if you're a member of the church, you already know that. But this is your first time on camera, which it might be. I mean, watching on camera, that's who we are. And we're here at Linwood Community Church, and we're gonna just tell you a little bit about us. Um, I can tell you right now, we've been married for 48 years, uh, and we're both complete opposites at the beginning. And so um, the reason we have been married 48 years is because it was a union that God put together. And like Rosie told me the other day, she goes, "Yeah, did you pray for a Christian wife?" You go, "Yeah, I think I only dated in my life one person that wasn't a Christian. That date didn't even go the full date." So, yeah. And so I think, as you're going to hear some stories right now, you need to realize that God put us together. And when God has a plan and He does it, no matter what you go through, because we all go through rough times, um, that was His plan. And His plans are never wrong. And even though we're tested and we're human beings like everybody else, and you get sick and you get injured, and whatever it is, you always have that as your foundation to fall back on. So I'm going to let my wife talk a little bit more because she usually doesn't talk a lot, and not that you can't, it's just probably because I talk a lot, and plus I'm just getting over this head cold, and I sound like I'm in a tunnel, but that's okay. So Rosie, go ahead and share some of your thoughts on your life actually before you met me, and then I can chime in, because that's something people need to understand, is that what you see now is a union of two people, but before came from different places. So you're up.
Okay, so I attended the First Mexican Baptist Church in San Pedro, which was over by his grandma's end of town. He lived on the upper end of town. I was 16 years old when I went to a Billy Graham movie. I can't remember the name of the movie. But at the end of the movie, they had a calling up front, and that's when I went up front to accept the Lord. And then in our little church, which was one block from our house, I was baptized, and I played the piano in church and went to youth group and attended all of that. We both went to San Pedro High School, but we never knew each other at San Pedro High School because it was a somewhat large school, and he was into sports, and I was not into sports. And so we never met each other until Harvard College, and we were both dating other people, and my best friend was dating Lefty's cousin.
Best friend. My
Yeah.
cousin's best friend. Yeah.
My best friend. And I just told my friend that I just wanted to meet him, so I knew who he was, and got introduced to him. And we were actually set up on a date. It wasn't a blind date because we had been introduced like 2 weeks prior. And I got stood up on a date. We were supposed to double date, and he had planned it with his cousin to meet up at a family function. And he came knocking on the door saying that his car broke down. And he came in, and I go, "Oh, yes, I remember who you are." And we just hit it off from the very beginning. And from that very first, we went out the next day, and from that very first date, we dated each other for 2 years and got married.
I just need to make something real clear.
Oh,
when we got set up on this, I owed my cousin a favor because because she wasn't a girlfriend. She was in our church. She was a senior in high school, and I just got into high school as a 10th grader, but she asked me to take her to the prom. First of all, I don't know nothing about proms. I'm 14 years old. And the first thing in my mind was a prom. I was more interested in which game I was going to pitch next. And so I asked my cousin to fill in for me because he was a senior. So he took this girl to the prom. He says, well, you owe me. And man, it was 5 years later. 5 or 6 years later, when I was playing basketball in the gym at the college, he came in. He goes, "Come on, we're going." I go, "Where are we going?" He goes, "You owe me." I go, "Oh, you what?" He goes, "You owe me for that date at the prom." So I didn't question it. I said, "Okay, let's go." So on the way home, up to my mom's, he says, "You know, my date, they were going to double date, and she got stood up, so you're going to fill in." I go, "I don't want a blind date. I got a girlfriend. I can't do that. I'm." He goes, "Well, you owe me." So I said, "All right, who am I going to be the blind date with?" And he told me her name, and I had just met her 2 weeks before. I go, "All right, I'm in." And so we set it up, and it was sort of corny, but as things happened, like she said, we from that night till today, we just connected, still connect. So God had a reason, God had a purpose. And like I said, since we were both Christians, it was his purpose, was his will, and so all we did was follow suit. So you're up.
So I knew I was in for a ride, a journey, an adventure of a lifetime, because at our wedding, he had started coaching Little League. And the entire Little League team came to our wedding in their uniforms. And that year, their team won the playoffs. So on our honeymoon, we went to Santa Monica to the Little League playoffs. And I go, okay, this is what I'm in for. So we were at the Little League playoffs in Santa Monica on our honeymoon. And from then on, I had to learn the sport of baseball. Baseball was his life. Coaching was his life. And I knew that was his gift because I saw how he interacted with kids and people, and knew that was his purpose. So you never try to contradict or go against what somebody's gift is you always have to allow your children to know what their gifts are and then to flourish those gifts. And so I just had to learn the sport of every sport, because he eventually became an AD, and we were at every single sport there is. In the beginning, he played golf a lot. And when you play a round of golf, it takes like 4 to 5 hours. And I go, I think I want to learn how to play golf because you're gone an awful lot. So I learned to play golf. I wasn't very good, but eventually our entire family learned to play golf. Joelle and I were terrible. Jason and Lefty were very competitive, but we played golf everywhere. Palm Springs, California, everywhere in California. So where do you want me to jump to?
Well, just a thing, when you talk about raising a family, while we were down in Southern California, I was teaching and she was working in aerospace. We were in our youth group as assistant youth group directors, and in our church, and our kids went to Awana, and we lived the Christian life in the city while we had careers, jobs. And so we had always been involved in some type of ministry as long as we could work it around our family and our jobs. And our family was always with us. So one thing I really feel blessed is that we we didn't have to leave our kids different places. We had a chance to be in their life. And so then we got this calling to go quit our jobs. She had a good job at aerospace, and I was teaching it at my alumnus high school, San Pedro High, and coaching football, and so we ended up going up north to help start a Christian school, and actually I was the principal of a Christian school, and help build a church in a small community. And the lifestyle change was awesome. It was adventurous. It was different than what we had done, but God blessed us in so many ways. I'm going to let her talk about that.
So when I was at the point where I wanted to make a change in my job because of politics in the workforce, and it was like I got fed up with how that was going. So, and then he wanted to leave his job because he had several of his students involved in gang activity and shot and killed 4 of them. So he says he didn't want to raise our kids in the city anymore. So it was kind of, we were young, so I figured, okay, well, this could be an adventure. We can try it out, and if it doesn't work out, we can always come back. So we went up there to start the one-room Christian schoolhouse, which was one room. How many students? 12 students, I think we had, of which Joel was pre-kindergarten, and I think Jason was, what, 5th grade maybe?
Second grade, I think.
Yeah, he was young. And then I helped with physical education because it was on Lefty's aunt and uncle's ranch, which was 200 and some acres. So we did that for a while. We left our jobs, went up there for $600 a month. We found a little mobile home, and I would wake up in the mornings and I would find crates of peaches and crates of tomatoes. We had chickens. Everything was provided. So, and then the ladies of the church would come and show me how to can. So on that $600 a month, we made it. And we did that for 2 years. And one of the kids in the youth group wanted to go down to Mendocino College, and Lefty took him. And so he went down to Mendocino College, took him in and helped him to get into the college, and the secretary said, well, what do you do, to Lefty? And he says, well, I used to coach. And she says, well, as a matter of fact, we have a job opening. And that's one thing that Lefty has never had to do, is jobs always open. Doors were always opened up for him. He never had to look for a job. Jobs were always there. And so he says, really? So when he came home, and I said, well, maybe this is the Lord telling you that you need to get back into coaching. And he had come to the point where little kids were not his calling as far as the school went. He said he'd rather deal with college kids or high school kids. So he went and he interviewed. He got the job. He happened to know people that were interviewing him that had seen him play during his baseball career, so they knew who he was. And so then that opened up the doors for him to coach for several years, and then evolve into an AD, athletic director's position, which involved all the other sports. There was a lot of times when he needed us to step in to assist him as far as running a snack shack. By the age of 5 years old, my daughter knew how to run a snack shack. We would take tickets at the gates. But we were always together as a family. And lots of times, a lot of coaches' wives that I talked to resented the fact that coaching took their husbands away for long periods of time. But I knew that that was his love. And I wasn't going to ask him to get out of it and to work somewhere else where he hated it. your spouse always has to have a job where they enjoy going to their work, otherwise it makes it difficult. So we, as a family, were at all the games. We did tickets. We did the snack shack. We were always back. We were at baseball games, basketball games, soccer games, football games, girls softball. We were always the backup for him. And in that adventure, he eventually took a team to the Palawan Islands. One of his coaches from high school asked him if he would gather up a team to take to the Micronesian Islands, and he said, yes, I'll beat the bushes. I'll find kids to go. And we did. And Joelle sang the national anthem. She was 10 years old. And we went to the Micronesian Islands, which was a great adventure. It was hotter than heck. The humidity was terrible. The people were wonderful. They treated us magnificently. But to get to the Micronesian Islands, we had to go through Hawaii. We played a game in Hawaii, went to Micronesian Islands. And when I saw the island, I says, this plane's not going to make that island. It's too small. It was a really small island. And if you go onto the History Channel and you look up the island of Palau, they were in World War II, right? World War II. And so there was a lot of history on the island in that right off of first base was a full tank that the Japanese had left right off the first baseline. And there was underground tunnels that the Japanese had dug and left and abandoned. You could see the holes in the coral from the bombs in World War II. But the History Channel has a really good history on the Palawan Islands.
So let me tell you the contact. All right, so there's always a contact. When you're looking for reasons why and how, God's the one that gives you the reason. So the one that I connected with for this trip was my former high school catcher, who was also a Christian. And we, my wife and I, and his wife, and a couple other people ran the Young Life together at San Pedro High School. So through the connections and through his connections with the island, we set this trip up, and it was years after we even thought about it. But, God brings these people into your life, and they keep coming back for a reason. And so we got to take our whole family. My son even played. He played over there. Take our whole family on this trip, and all the kids in our neck of the woods. The biggest school that we took kids from was 450 students. So small school kids that never left the county are now on the other side of the world. And it was a great experience. It was a great baseball thing, but in my view, what it is the connection that God allows us to have with our Christian brothers and sisters. So through that whole scenario, I had a chance to work with my kids. I started to coach my son, which was, most fathers want their kids to be Major League Baseball players, and they're gonna work them until they do this, and their whole focus is to get their kids to the major leagues. Well, pretty much the opposite. I had a blessing just working with my kid, and the time I got to spend with them and his teams. I never worried about winning championships. It's just one of the things that happens, And so my son got to play for a coach that cared more about the kids, the people, their lives, than winning a game. And so we weren't the most talented team, but couldn't tell my players that. And it was an amazing journey that I got to go on with my family. And like Rosie said, she was keeping score in the stands. Joelle's running the snack shack. And she probably could have been scouting the other team for me. If I was smart, my daughter would have been charting the other team. But she was up there singing and socializing with everybody in the stands. And so God blessed me with a job that wasn't so focused on winning championships as it was on people and being able to minister. And my teams at the college when I was coaching, I told them, I said, listen, you guys are going to go to Bible studies. Pick out your church. I don't care what your church you go to. And because that's what was at the center of my heart at that time. I mean, I'd already gone through the win at all costs, playing the major universities when I first started, and that's not where God wanted me. So here we are, and then my job changes from a coach to an AD. And so now I can make my own hours. Since I worked weird hours, baseball or basketball's at night, so my hours were long, so I could work my hours. And in the meantime, my family, it was just actually at that time, Joel, Rosie, and Jason had gone to Westmont College, and he was gone. So I started preaching in different churches in Northern California, and man, we'd drive sometimes an hour and a half to go preach at a church, and then the next week we'd be at a Baptist church, a Methodist church, so I was just like a roving pastor, and until one church said, hey, we really want you to stay. And so the American Missionary Fellowship basically accepted me as a pastor, associate pastor, missionary pastor, and so I was there for 3 years pastoring a little white church in rural America, just like you see in the movies and on the postcards. And my wife played the piano. My daughter was the minister of everything known to human beings, weddings, concerts. Joel and Rosie would bake the cake for a wedding. Joel and Rosie would plan the wedding, and Joel would sing in the wedding. Rosie would play the piano in the wedding, and I'd marry the couple. So it was really a family ministry. And so at that time, that's what I did. And I'll be honest with you, my whole life I was only known as two things. One, Coach Lefty, and two is Pastor Lefty. And it gave me chills when the first time I heard one of the ladies in church call me Pastor Lefty. It gave me chills because, it wasn't like coaching. I mean, you can lose a game, but when you're a pastor, you need to be able to preach the right thing, or you're going to be losing lives. And so it was a little different type of pressure. I really didn't feel a whole lot of pressure coaching, but when you're a pastor, it is a lot. It is a lot because you're trying to serve the Lord, and you don't want to say something that isn't true. So at that time, that's where we were. Then I'll flip it back to Rose.
Where do you want me to start?
Wherever you want.
The move?
Yeah.
We moved in. Okay, so then we were there for 17 years?
17 years. Yeah.
17 years up in Northern California. And it was a great place for our kids to grow up because it was mostly farmlands, just rural. We always knew where our kids were. We would get on the phone, are you at so-and-so's house? And we could always trace where they were. My son got the experience to be able to work on a farm. I go, you'll appreciate going to college more if you go ahead and work on that farm. And he says, wow, that was really hard work. And and I had worked in the police departments, and I thought we were in a nice little town. But it was 25,000 people there. But once I got into the police department, my eyes were opened. And it was right before they legalized marijuana, and we lived in the Emerald Triangle, so that was an experience. Jason he liked it, but he liked the city better because it rained from November till March, and he loved to play golf, and he could never play in the wintertime because of the rain. So when he left and went to college, he wanted to stay in Southern California. And then another job opportunity came open to Lefty. Somebody says, we have this position that we're considering. Would you consider working? And Lefty had just told me, I think like the week before, he says, I've been praying, he says, because my work here is done. He says, I can't do any more at this school. He says, and because he likes to build programs, he says, I can't do any more. I think it's time for a change. So he got the call saying that there was this job opportunity down in Barstow. And I go, Barstow? Like everybody does. Barstow, wow. And I go, well, I guess we're going. He says, I go because I'm not going to go against the word of what God wants you to do. If that's how he's moving you, I got to go. So we came down. He came down and interviewed, got the position, and that's when he found out that his mom had gotten sick. So it was God's work getting us down here just in time for her so that he could spend more time with her. We came to Barstow. There's not much to be had in Barstow, but some of the professors said, look into Silver Lakes, and that's where we ended up, in Silver Lakes, which is halfway between Victorville and Barstow. And so that's what we did. And so Lefty was able to spend time with his mom. And then from there, he left Barstow and went on down to Compton, Compton was in trouble. They lost their accreditation, and it was a program that he could build, and that's what he liked to do. He liked to build and develop programs from scratch, and that's what they wanted him to do. So he did that for, 4 or 5 years?
5 years, yeah.
5 years. And what we would do is he would go down there, live down there during the week, and then we would go down on the weekend and visit him. And we did that for 5 years before he retired because at that point, the school system was making cuts, and they were asking him to wear too many hats, so he was putting in way too many hours, 14 hours a day, 16 hours a day, and he says, this job is killing me, I got to get out. And I go, well, then go ahead and get out. So he took retirement, but he did a lot of changes at Compton, and same thing, we were there, we ran the snack shack, we helped him do the football games, sell tickets, we did the same thing. And Joelle was singing the national anthem, and then he retired, and I continued to work.
So I'll take it from there.
Okay.
I'm going to go back and tell you that when I did go to Barstow, I had the same thought that she had, Barstow, but yeah, this is where if you're putting your trust in the Lord and what He wants you to do, you just go. And I had already been to Barstow in 1982, which was 15 years before that. My uncle spent the last 8 to 10 years of his life in Barstow as a minister. He used to preach in a lot of the churches. And I'd come down here to Barstow and spend the day with him, and he'd take me out into the desert, and we'd pray. And man, I love my uncle, man. He was an amazing Christian man. And so he spent the last part of his life in Barstow. But I told myself, I go, man, this is something down here. I'm never coming down to Barstow, man. So let's make a long story short. Where do you think God sends me? He sends me right back to the place I said I wasn't going to go. And so I was there, did that, and then when it was time for me to leave, I went to Compton. And I went to Compton, and I had 3 job interviews lined up for 2 weeks. And one was a vice president job at Long Beach City satellite campus. Started at $156,000. I go, wow, pretty good. And the other one was as a dean of institutional of instruction in King City near Hanford, and that was another high-paying job. So I'd have athletics under me and everything else. And then there was Compton. Okay, everybody's got Compton's got a reputation, and hey, it was well earned. believe I'm not going to say it wasn't a well-earned reputation as being one of the best top crime, cities in America. Uh, and I interviewed for that job first, and then I had the other ones lined up. And I prayed about, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do from this point? I always did that because I was assured of being at a spot that he wanted me, and he'd take care of me. He'd take care of my family. So I get to Compton, I do the interview. They say, well, we'll let you know in a couple of weeks if you got a final interview. Well, before I left the parking lot, they called me and said, hey, you have a final interview. We're going to interview next week. I go, okay. So I came back, I interviewed, and they go, well, we're going to let you know after we get a hold of everybody else. And I was on the road for 5 minutes, and they called and said, hey, we want to hire you. We're going to bring you in at step one. I said, well, you want to hire me, but I'm not coming in at step one. I've been doing this for a number of years, so you can put me in the middle and hire me, or you can find somebody else. I have 2 more interviews coming up this next week. So obviously, 5 minutes later, I get a call back. It says, okay. And so I knew I was supposed to be there. And I have to tell you something about Compton. That was probably one of the greatest places I ever worked. The people that I worked with were amazing, and most of them Christians. And for all the bad rap that community got, those students who I still communicate with on a regular basis, and the coaches that I communicate with, some of the secretaries, and they became part of my life, and I was part of their life. And so the bottom line is, God put me in a place which was supposed to be a fearful place, and had one of the greatest experiences of my teaching career. I thank God for that. And so then I retire, and for the 5 months of, because I retired in January, and between January and June, I got to go coach my alumnus high school varsity baseball program, something I wanted to do my whole life, and got to do that. And so I thank the Lord for that, and I knew it was just a one-deal interim spot, and that was okay with me, because I never had any plans on being a Major League Baseball player. I never had plans on being a college coach forever. My plans were wherever God put me. And he always gave me a little taste of what I really wanted to do when I was younger, to show me that that's not really what I was destined for. It was his will, and I was blessed to have a wife that believed the same thing, and kids that did the same thing. And so from that point on to retirement, we came back to Barstow. We lived in Silver Lakes, and Rosie worked at Victor Valley, and I retired early. And then we got involved here at Linwood Community Church, and God's still working with me and with us, because I've seen a lot of growth in my wife, and my daughter, of course, she's singing again, and I won't go into that story, but God took care of my family, and so we're all serving the Lord, and that's the one thing that we started our marriage with, and that's still going strong. So through all the ups and downs and all the peaks and valleys, my wife got to go from a very normal, everyday, very safe life growing up, and marry a guy whose hair was on fire every day, doing the craziest things you could think of doing, and being Mr. Adventure, and doing sometimes really dumb things. So when you put those two together, it was pretty good. 48 years, and our children are Christians, and now we get the chance to still do the Lord's work with our daughter and my son-in-law Derek. And my son is actually teaching at junior high I went to in San Pedro, and now I have a granddaughter who just got into high school, and she's, believe it or not, into sports. So I'm pretty pumped up about that. But a testimony is not about what you do, it's about what God does for you. So what he's done for us is he's really blessed my family. He's given us the opportunity to just to serve him and use the talents we have. And, my wife is probably the most creative and talented, gifted person because she can do things you'll never know because she'll never tell you. If she says 5 words to you before she knows you, that's amazing. But if you ever walked into my house and saw the oil paintings on the wall, she did those. And one of her very first paintings was about Hank Aaron hitting a 715th home run because that's the painting I wanted. She painted it, man. It was amazing. So her gifts are, a lot more gifts than I have. She does paintings and crafts and used to can foods and does a lot of stuff. So he put together 2 people who didn't really do the same thing, but we adjusted to each other. And now our family, our kids, do a little bit of each. They've taken a little bit of each of us and done what they want. And I just thank the Lord because I can't sit here and tell you. I know there have been times in my life where I almost died. I don't even want to get into the stories, but at least 3 times in my life, I saw my life flash before me, and one really close one. But besides that, listen, I can't complain. He put me in my mom raised me. My dad left when I was 5. I love my dad, but he was not my father. He wasn't a father to me, but I love him. He was my dad, and so our connection ended when I was 5, and my mom raised us, and my uncles all jumped in and helped, and God raised me. And when I did something stupid, something wrong, that's, I knew I did it. It was I didn't have somebody I could run to and say, hey, what about this? My dad was going to tell me about the birds and the bees. I was already married. When he says, hey, we need to have the sex talk, I go, oh, Dad, I've been married for a year, man. But you can forget about that talk. That's long gone, But God's taking care of us, man. And I look back on it and I just think, man, how blind could a person be? My only thing is I really I'm ashamed to say that I didn't realize earlier in my life how, I guess I could have just gone this way and been a pastor or been a missionary. And I look back, I go, wait a minute, that's actually what I did. I was a missionary without thinking about being a missionary, and a pastor without thinking about being a pastor. And the gift he gave me was about team. As a coach. So what do? You build a team. Did it in sports. I did it as a director, and I think that when God, my sermon this Sunday, by the way, is when you see this, it might not be the Sunday, but it's about the apostles, about Jesus when he built his team. So God's blessed us, blessed our kids, and just very fortunate to be at Linwood, where the congregation, my brother Tim, who's always mans the technical stuff that I know nothing about, and care about each other. This is a church family. This is a church family that worships the one true God. So when you talk about religion, please don't talk to me, because I'm not and never have been a religious person when it comes to my faith in Christ. It's not about religion. It's about my personal relationship. And then my wife's is about her personal relationship. God just put 2 people together, made it work. So that's all I got to say. You got anything to add?
I think the only thing I want to add is that when you're walking with the Lord and he puts people in your path, you have to recognize why that person has come into your life. It's usually for a reason. And if you're not walking with him, then you won't notice those opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, she can't say it any better than that. You know, you could preach to people all you want. You could fool yourself all you want, but until you follow what he said and asked you to do, then you're going to be blind. Even as Christians, there's times in my life, man, I think I said a couple of weeks ago, there's been many times in my life I don't take my Bible on vacation. I leave my Bible at home. Why? Because I didn't see what was really obvious, and that is I should be able to take him anywhere. If he's part of my life, he comes with me. And so we can't put that on a shelf. It was funny because we went to a wedding. Well, I took Rosie to a wedding. I was sick, so I stayed in the hotel, dropped her off, picked her up. First thing she she looked in the drawer, she goes, "Oh, a Gideon Bible." And the bottom line was, I haven't seen a Gideon Bible in a hotel in a long time. But this Ayers, and I'll give the Ayers Hotel Suites, whatever, I'll give them credit. They put Gideon Bibles in the rooms. And maybe those that don't want to believe in God or have faith, maybe they don't want to go to that hotel because there's a Bible there. That's too bad. You're missing out. So my wife says you need to have your eyes open to the people that come into your life. People come into my life every day, and for the first time in this last, I'd say maybe a year and a half, my eyes are open to their needs. That's what we have to be doing. So our testimony is simple. God's done everything for us, and he didn't pull me out of the mud like my uncle, who was a drunk and a wild man when he was a young kid. He didn't, reach down and pull me out because I was such a troublemaker. Everybody's different, but he did. Don't get me wrong. He did reach down and pull me up because we're all sinners, and my sins were a little different than my uncles and my other uncles and my friends, and so God does that for us, and that's the testimony for me. Is as simple. He gave me a godly wife, and we raised our children in the way they should go. Now, whether they all stay that way or that's up to them, it's their individual life. But I'm just blessed to be where I'm at right now with my church family and people that surround me here that love me, and they know I love them. So I think with that, we're going to sign off and go back to 116-degree weather. And thank God for the desert. And we've been able to be at the beach, been able to be up north, and now in the desert. So we got to see it all in our life so far. So anyways, thank you for letting us share part of our life and our testimony. Thank God for that.